theory's right in theory, but not in reality. And the thing with the health space is that each little problem is so big that in theory, like everyone is right. There's a lot of problems and that just brings like anyone interested in opportunity. The problem is that in reality, like realizing the sort of that opportunity comes with inherent challenges that are often uh, uh, misunderstood or underappreciated.
They say it's lonely at the top. They're right. But you don't have to scale your company alone. Welcome to the Scaling CEO. I'm Glenn Gow, the CEO Success Coach. On this podcast, I sit down with top performing CEOs to uncover the hidden patterns and frameworks behind their success so you can avoid common pitfalls and accelerate your company's growth. Now, on to the show. My guest today is Matt Cohen, the CEO of PlaySpace. Matt is working on a problem that is both deeply personal and a massive market opportunity, making therapy work for kids. He and his team are building a virtual platform designed to give therapists the tools they need to actually engage children, teens, and neurodivergent adults. Before founding PlaySpace, Matt was on the strategic front lines of digital health at MindBeacon, where he described the lack of access to mental health care as fundamentally unjust, a belief that clearly drives him today. Matt's not just another founder. He's a strategist with a background in both psychology and management consulting, and he's tackling one of the toughest scaling challenges out there, bringing innovative tech to a field built on human connection. Today, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of how he's scaling his company and himself to fix a system he believes is broken. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Matt, you're building a platform for therapists so they can better engage kids. That's two tough customer sets in one. Looking back at the early days, what's the one scaling insight you learned the hard way that would have saved you months of pain and struggle?
So I'd say healthcare is something that's traditionally local. And, prior to COVID, even state by state in the US, province by province, country to country, it's quite different. And so thinking globally within healthcare is often something that is a challenge. And I say this as I'm from Toronto, Canada. Our company is based in Canada, but actually the majority of our business is outside of Canada today. And I think that people, whether it's within a niche within product scope or geography when it comes to healthcare, will say, focus on one area and then move out and expand. But in reality, each market in healthcare has different opportunities that actually lend at different points in time. So the scale, for example, of the US market is something that I wish that I invested into more at the beginning because there's more opportunities and more actionable opportunities that we could have taken advantage of rather than having more limited opportunities per se that might have taken longer to realize in Canada and limit our ability to get the proof points that are needed to raise and scale internationally. So I would just say going out to where there's big markets
So,
and not being
are
afraid
you
of doing it in Canada.
right? Are you saying that in retrospect, if we had focused first on choosing the right market or a bigger or better opportunity market for us, we would have scaled faster?
More so saying they're not mutually exclusive. I don't need to prove it in Canada to be able to prove it in the States. And there's no order. So if I can prove it in the States and get more traction there, then it's almost like I'm hedging my bet and creating more opportunities to be able to execute upon in Canada. But when you limit your proof points in an already challenging market, as you started the question with two hard things of going after, now limit the market opportunity to validate both of those proof points only makes it more challenging when widening the net gives us a better opportunity early of proving that to be able to, scale and raise money if necessary, and validate the product clinically, as
Got
needed.
it. Got it. Got it. Now, in your work at MindBeacon, you described the lack of access to mental health care as fundamentally unjust.
That's powerful language. You also started your university education in psychology. How much of scaling PlaySpace is a business strategy problem versus a personal mission to fix that injustice?
Um, yeah, I personally struggle to separate the two, and I wouldn't recommend that to others because you know it at times um it at times can make me too attached to the business. But with that said, within our business, the personal mission that we're trying to achieve, as well as the business strategy objectively that we've identified and honed in through my experience, I actually see as being complementary. And the number one rule anyone here in my company will tell you is that we cannot interrupt or hurt a session. If we're trying to promote virtual care in a space now that sees very little of it, if we're trying to enable therapists and really get their buy-in to be partners, then uh, uh, we can't shoot ourselves in the foot and not deliver on that promise. And so I think that personal connection has sort of created some guardrails in our business that not only attracts people who share the passion for the mission, but I think also has our company's compass always sort of pointing in the right direction and not having us do things that may be unethical, that might toe the line there, or might actually be adversely impacting patients, which is what is needed for success in healthcare. So
Right,
I think there's some rigor there.
right. Now, one of the things you have going for you that not all companies have is you have a purpose. And I love that. First of all, congratulations for creating something with such an important purpose. When I look at the key motivators of employees, there are five key motivators, but one of them is purpose. And I encourage CEOs who have a company that has a serious purpose to continually remind employees why we're here. Why do we wake up in the morning excited about going to work? It's not just because of the work; it's because of the impact we can have. And so, um, you want to just talk a little bit about what kind of impact you're trying to have?
Yeah. So 9 of 10 therapists today are not in network with insurance companies that work with children. And also, while 55% of all therapy sessions today are delivered virtually, when it comes to pediatrics, only 1 in 10 sessions is done virtually. And it's all gone back to in person because they don't have the tools that they would need, let's say, in a traditional business conferencing solution to serve the patients as they would in their physical playrooms. Now, let's take the US. 80% of counties don't have a regulated child mental health professional. So we can't tell people not to live where they live, and we can't tell providers to move to be able to serve patients that don't have access today. And so it's not about saying what is right and what's the one way to do things. It's saying, what's the evolution that needs to happen that actually empowers therapists to make care more accessible. Therapists do not believe they're not effective, and therapists do not believe that they're inaccessible. And I'm not saying that they are ineffective and they are not accessible on the whole. But what I'm saying is therapy is on the whole not accessible. And there's certainly not effectiveness in virtual. And so for us, sort of the mission and that purpose is what we're selling because there's an adoption curve and an evolution curve that needs to happen for there to be sort of macro changes in the space. And our role is to be that partner to therapists, and employees in this business, need to understand that we're not going to be able to do that overnight, and that it's that stewardship of the evolution and the opportunity to contribute to it is one that we're very fortunate to have. Therapists are busy. They don't have time. They're not technology forward. They're not trying to change their systems. They went to school for a long time, more than me, to be in a profession, and it's not for me to tell them how to do their job. So to get them to contribute to our mission and help us realize our collective goal is a massive opportunity that we need to appreciate and take seriously, and one that I think is inspiring to people that are able to balance, profits with purpose and creating shared value for all stakeholders.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Now you come from a strategy and consulting background. From that perspective, you've seen how other companies operate. What's the biggest blind spot you see most CEOs have when they hit an inflection point and try to seriously scale?
What I would say is that just to give some context to this, 20, let's call it 15, 2016 is when digital health as an industry really started. Like there was not much conversation of any digital health products at that time. And then COVID is when we sort of had the inflection, but also a little bit of the bubble bursting to say it's not going to be that quick. As much as we'd love for it to be 4 years, it's going to take more time and there's a lot more to work out than what we have. And I just give that context because I was fortunate to start my career in the digital health space at that time, be an operator in the business, from founding to IPO and post IPO and things of that nature, and doing a lot of M&A. And the one thing that has always stuck with me that is actually my old boss that he said to me was theory's right in theory, but not in reality. And the thing with the health space is that each little problem is so big that in theory, like everyone is right. There's a lot of problems and that just brings like anyone interested in opportunity. The problem is that in reality, like realizing the sort of that opportunity comes with inherent challenges that are often uh, uh, misunderstood or underappreciated. And so you get folks that are very much sort of in love with their solution without full context of why the problem exists and solving all of the fundamental issues in the problem to make sure that their solution, can scale and realizes its intended benefit sort of on a macro level. And so that gap, I would say, is the biggest sort of blind spot, I would say, that exists for folks and is the biggest misconception of our space because if we just have this much penetration in this massive market, you know, we can hit our ARR objectives or our, return thresholds or certain valuations that but might be targeted. However, in practice, what is needed to realize that has context that needs to be addressed. And just because you have a solution doesn't mean that it addresses all of those problems to get the buy-in that you need from gatekeepers and stakeholders in a complicated and challenging space to get there.
Right. Right. Well, let's play on that just a little bit. So you're selling to therapists and they are not typically early adopters. So let's think about other CEOs who need to crack the code on scaling with a user base that's traditionally resistant to technology. Tell us some of the things that you have figured out for the audience here, the other CEOs that might be struggling with that.
So uh, I would say it's about meeting them where they are and selling the mission and then leveraging the product to support what that means for that user. And so there's a lot of folks that, again, they fall in love with their solution without trying to understand the problem. And so if we went out there to
Right.
say we're making therapy more accessible and effective, that would not resonate with our audience because that's not the problem that they're experiencing. And I'm also in no place to prescribe to them how they should practice as folks that went to school and have the competence to practice. But it's my
Right.
job to be able to meet them where they are today and speak to how we can make their life easier and be part of the evolution that will happen and not have to be a term taker, but contribute to being the term setter. And we're willing to listen and we're willing to engage. And I think that's something that is frankly needed. But then also on the whole, I think in healthcare, change is hard for anyone. Those that have distribution or that have leverage or scale of providers, let's say, or of spend, they have built that up and are extremely protective of it. And so if you're wanting to work with them or take a slice out of their business and think that just on the merit of your product, you're going to be able to do so, I think is quite naive. And it's important to engage them and sort of create shared value and don't believe that winning means that others have to lose. And especially in health where you might use, let's just say, a traditional video conferencing solution, one that is maybe widely deployed like Zoom. But if you're a provider, you actually have to pay for a HIPAA compliant version of Zoom. And that
Right.
starts at that simple, but it goes to your cloud hosting. It goes to your testing. It goes to, your integration platforms. I mean, Zapier, used by many to automate workflows and accomplish many objectives, is not HIPAA compliant. It's not SOC, and so we can't use it. And so
Right.
that means we have to invest a lot and more than others would have to, let's say, invest in something for a different market. And that means that we have to make it as easy as possible. And in terms of getting the buy-in from others and reducing the sales cycles or the friction to adoption, but also we have to get as much buy-in and support in promoting the impact and the objective that we're hoping to achieve with our mission, so that I don't also have to be the one to educate the markets, not just on the problem and prioritization, because there's merit to every problem. It's why this, why now, but also that this is then the solution and that should be adopted in line with that problem in a prioritized sequence. So I think getting others to help support that and not having to bear the full load on yourself is meaningful, and something that we saw early in the digital therapeutic space. They wanted to have formularies like we have with drugs, have it be prescription-based digital therapeutics, FDA approval, control the formularies, and all that did was stifle distribution and increase sort of the thresholds that companies have to invest to be able to get to commercialization. And that stifled the industry so much that today that's not the preferred path. And all these companies that built those moats now sold for pennies because those moats became actually real barriers that were insurmountable, and they
Right.
couldn't
Right.
retain those moats and benefit from it long term.
Right.
And I love the concept of meeting your customer where you are. Many companies, you're right, they build a solution um, without like a really deeply close understanding of the market that they're serving. And many times I'll be working with a CEO and they're putting together the messaging, or they're talking about how they're going to go give a talk at a conference, and we talk about how to speak in the language of the buyer and the user. Use their words, use their perspective. Don't talk about your perspective as a product builder, but rather connect with them at the level of the problems they have. They may not even be thinking about your company as a solution. They're thinking about the problems that they have. And if you can speak to their problems, you can connect with them. As many people know, AI is one of my favorite topics to talk about with CEOs. And you're in a particularly interesting space as it relates to AI. There are a lot of discussions about where AI plays a role in therapy and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But let's start from the perspective of your advice to other CEOs and how to think about using AI inside the company. And then let's talk about how to use AI inside the product. Because what I recommend to CEOs is that they encourage everybody inside the company to use AI in some capacity, regardless of the tool they're using, to look at AI as a tool available to them, a companion, if you will, available to them to get their job done. And then I encourage CEOs to incorporate AI into their product or service in any way they possibly can to take advantage of the incredible opportunities created by AI. So give us some advice, both about what you're doing and to other CEOs.
Yeah, well, what I'd say is I think AI is the equalizer for operators in terms of like fundraising, and you don't need to have the same amount of capital early on to be able to get to market or scale in market, especially when you're early, you're trying to establish product market fit or, reach certain metrics and milestones. And so I think leaning into it is super important. We're extremely forward in how we assess and leverage AI for internal use cases. And what I'd say is that AI can do anything, but it's not perfect at much yet. And so I think the opportunity for AI can become a distraction because sometimes getting it 80% of the way there, is really easy, but getting it to 90, 98, 100, that takes a lot of work. And so it can be misleading, and it's important to find where it can unlock a lot of value, be realistic about the return on investment, or opportunity or efficiencies that AI can
Right.
provide, and be methodical to ensure that it really is something that you're going to need on a repeated basis, and not something that would be a nice to have, but really you're now over investing in automation when you don't know necessarily that what the configuration or scope of that automation is something that is not going to be changing over sort of the evolution and growth of the business. So find
Right.
the most meaningful use cases and do it that way.
Right, and
Um,
I just wanna make one comment about, a debate I often have with CEOs around AI and whether or not it's useful and the amount of work associated with incorporating it into operations, let's say. And the answer we often come up with is, "Well, look, we understand it's imperfect. We understand it will make mistakes, but the question is, does it make more mistakes than a human doing the job or fewer mistakes than a human doing the job?" And that is one bar to consider. So it applies first and foremost in customer success organizations where we can figure out pretty quickly whether or not the AI is performing at a higher level or not. It's more complex in other areas, like in strategy development, but if we assume there are some mistakes, whether it's a human working with us or an AI working with us, if we can get AI up to the level, and there are ways to do this, to where it's performing at a higher level than the human, then it's going to be an incredibly valuable tool.
yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I would almost say that even if it's making more mistakes than a human would, actually going through the process of discerning that is incredibly valuable, because absent that, then there's the theory that it can be better than a human. And until you actually test that and see for yourself, you don't know where the limitations are, and to know if those limitations are something that makes it still accretive and not. And I say that as someone that has tested, many of the same products, and the nuances between those products can actually like reflect the nuances, particularly in our case, around the adoption of that, right? And we are dealing with folks that have historically not adopted technology. Healthcare as a whole has been, behind many other industries in adopting technology. And so when you're thinking about those use cases for them to adopt it, if we're not looking at the nuances within the products, even internally to use, then how are we going to like not sort of again fall in love with our solution and then just hope that everyone else adopts it? And I think that sort of critical eye and understanding where it is helpful in understanding then the rigor and or the considerations that go into actually deploying that in a product.
So let's cover this with one last question. So we'll go back to that question of you are dealing with a technology, not a quick technology adoption or sort of target market. Um, Help the audience, particularly as it relates to AI, understand how do you introduce do something that can be scary to the user, that might be considered as a threat to their very existence, in a way that causes them to absorb or even embrace AI.
Yeah, so I think it's about making sure that every aspect of those considerations is accounted for upfront. And in our context, I mean, we don't have AI anywhere mentioned, and we're not hiding anywhere AI is used. But for someone like yourself, or someone like me, or within the business world or within the technology world, we say AI as a description of a product. When really, if you're a therapist, it's about what's the use case that AI is being applied to. And is that a use case where I can benefit from what it is? So let's take our context. We actually have an AI storybook builder, because bibliotherapy and stories are often used by those that work with children and adolescents. But we don't call it an AI storybook builder. We call it a story generator. And, there are AI scribes. We call that, note-taking assistant. And it's not hiding that there is AI to generate. We have, descriptors, disclaimers, we have considerations that go with it. but I think it's about applying it to a use case that allows them to be able to receive it, not with the preconceived notions they may have about AI. And then the other thing is, I think it has to be authentic. So our business model has always been that we are enabling therapists and that therapists are the conduits to change. We are not trying to replace therapists or work around therapists. So when we think about AI therapy, and there's, a company raised over $90 million to build AI therapists. And within that announcement of which is, monumental in our space, within a month of that, we had two states, Nevada and Illinois, ban AI therapy. And I
Oh,
actually
wow.
think that is very much the right call because an AI therapy, like therapy is a regulated act. There's not an AI surgeon. There might be AI surgical support tools, but it's not an AI surgeon. To say that you're an AI therapist is at odds with, clinicians that go to school for a long period of time, and are specialized to deliver what is a regulated product. And so I think if an organization like that was genuine in what they wanted to do and wanting to work with therapists, calling it AI therapy and replacing AI therapists, I think is the wrong way to go about it. And I think in our context, I'm not saying that the use case doesn't exist. We don't have enough therapists. We need AI to bridge the gap and we'll never graduate enough. But I believe that if you're a parent, for example, you don't want to watch an ad and then hope that that product is going to be what does really impactful care. I actually think it's the therapist who might be the influencer of which tool then gets adopted. And so you have
Ah,
to work
right, right,
with
right.
them to be the sort of the enablers of change and the conduits to that change. So for us, it's about really being a partner to them and allowing them to feel that they can be in control, they can contribute to what that is, and that they can get behind that product and distribute it. Because once again, we're not telling patients what care to receive. We're not telling providers how to practice. We're enabling providers to be part of the change that will have the impact on patients. And by supporting them and meeting them where they are and allowing them to feel comfortable with it, that's how I believe it will get into patients' hands in a secure and a comfortable and safe way.
Fantastic. Matt, that's a great way to summarize what you're doing in that area. And
Thank you.
so, how can people reach you?
Go to playspace.health and look us up. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I have no other social media. That's for another conversation. But yeah, happy to chat with folks that are interested in the space, whether it's digital health or mental health of any capacity.
Well, thank you for doing what you're doing for all of us.
And likewise, I appreciate the opportunity to speak here.
Okay, Matt, thanks so much.
That's a wrap for today's episode of The Scaling CEO. If you found this valuable, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with a fellow CEO who could benefit. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give us a quick rating as it really helps more people find the show. I'm Glenn Gow, the CEO Success Coach. See you next time for more proven strategies to grow your business and leadership.